underline the sense of urgency. And also expressing our gratitude to countries who help. So this has been, I would say, the most difficult part of our job to balance the former and the latter. And of course, later we faced some other problems, like, for example, the grain blockade and problems that a lot of regions in the world faced because Ukrainian ports were blocked with the Russian warships and naval blockade, because Ukraine is a huge exporter of grains, of sunflower oil, and all the agricultural products. So this has been really a very difficult task to try to communicate out the reason of the problem, because you know that Russian propaganda has been always very, very active in trying to convince that Ukraine is the problem, and it's not the Russian aggression or the Russian naval blockade that stopped the shipment of grains. It's a difficult battle, but we know Russians, and we've been in this business for a long time, so we picked up the fight, basically. And I wouldn't say we were successful all the time, and still I don't think we succeeded in all ways. It's important to understand, like just to underline this part, it's important to understand that we never communicate alone. We're never the only voice in the room. There are always many various voices communicating, and they are rivaling narratives, so we're never alone. It's always a rivalry between narratives. And one speaker said today, actually, a very great phrase, that there is a level of facts, which can be just basically, we are all now in Istanbul. This is a fact and no one is going to contest it. But also there is a level of debate. The ancient Greeks called it doxa and episteme. Episteme is this basically factual reality that you can prove, and doxa is the area and the space where we can compete, the narratives can compete. So we're always in a competitive environment. And the second takeaway that we've got from our communication is that there is no more periodic communication. There is no more, we've held a meeting and then we communicated about it. We did something and then we make a report about it. We are living in the age of a stream of communication. It's a constant stream in which, well, I would say even like a chorus of streams or various streams in which you can only steer them in one or that direction for some time, not forever. And that's why the third takeaway is the consistency and persistency of messaging. I have a media background, and as a journalist, you tend to look for news which are basically new. That's why they're called news. Something new every time. In government communications, it's completely different. You actually need to communicate the same thing for a long time and repeat it, and really sometimes even get bored of yourself of repeating that. But it's the only way to get the message out to the audience. It's not enough to say once and someone is convinced. So just to conclude, a few important things that we learned throughout this time. First of all, in a situation like this and in a war of such intensity, you have always a defensive and I wouldn't call them offensive, it's not the proper word probably, but proactive, let's call them proactive communications to be more diplomatic. So defensive is when you actually try to defend from the narratives, from the propaganda, from the disinformation, from competing narratives. It's not always disinformation. Sometimes it's just a competing narrative, other worldview. Okay, but you have your own and you have to communicate it. So this is the defense. And today, a lot of speakers spoke about the defense in detail, on debunking disinformation, on protecting, like protecting from manipulations, from social media and so on and so forth. But our experience is that protecting and defending is not enough. It's essential, and you have to do that. And if you don't do that, you will not survive. You have to combat disinformation and, like protect from all of these lies which are online and viral things and so on and so forth. But if you don't have a proactive strategy, a narrative you actually want to tell, and if you don't try to get across the line, even to your adversary, even to communicate outside there in a completely hostile environment, or create a narrative which will limit the space for propaganda and disinformation, you will not survive. So you still need to always think ahead. And the other thing is that I think for Ukraine to win this communication battle in this year, the important thing was that Ukraine is a democracy, and Ukraine had a freedom of speech, and Ukraine had free media, and we've been born and raised in this culture. This is why we understand that there are different views, and you actually have to convince someone, and you have to be active in convincing. And I think that that's a kind of advantage that Ukraine has over Russia in communications, because in an environment where you don't have any free media, you don't have any free press, you don't have freedom of speech, you forget how to convince someone. You just have this propaganda going out all the time, and you basically lose skill. They lose skill. Moreover, I would dare to say that Russian propaganda has lost a lot of skill since 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They've been much more dangerous, persistent, and skillful before than they are now. And I think the reason for that is a very simple paradox. Actually, the paradox is that to lie well, you need to A, know the truth, B, construct a lie, and C, you have to compare your lie to the truth and check how good the lie is, whether it will be debunked or not. If you lie for a long time, for too long, you basically forget what the truth is. And when you forget what the truth is, you cannot lie well. This is the paradox. And the reason I think why Russian propaganda really became weaker, and we've been able to counter it much better. Just to conclude, my third conclusion today is that our work throughout this time included coordination of many institutions inside Ukraine. And this is one of the lessons, because it's not only the foreign ministry, it's the president's office, the government, various speakers, MPs, and basically all of the people of Ukraine who became communicators. And to coordinate all of this thing, we had a lot of effort, and and still have a lot of coordination between ourselves. And basically all of our people became Ukraine's ambassadors, and they communicate out, they speak out, they start social media campaigns, they deliver hashtags and so on and so forth. So the conclusion is that you cannot just be successful as a government. You need allies. You need the whole society to communicate, a thing to get the message out of the country. And of course, the primary element, I think, was the Ukrainian humor, of course. Some people do not understand why Ukraine keeps joking during the invasion, but I mean, even the government institutions putting out memes and jokes online and so forth. But this is the only strategy to get the message out. This is not actually us having fun during the invasion. The humor is a tool to get the message out far and wide, and also the tool to combat Russian authoritarian propaganda, because it's very serious, it's grandeur, it says we are the great country and we're gonna, conquer the world. And these people, the only thing they're afraid of is actually laughter, humor. They're not afraid of someone saying, you will not do this. They're afraid of someone saying, okay, we got it. So humor is a huge, powerful tool. This is another takeaway. I think we're out of time, but maybe we have some.
I do have to actually say that it obviously does help, and I say this with the utmost respect. It does help when the president of your country happens to be a former comedian as well. So that's important. George, I'm going to keep you on stage. I'm going to ask sort of our staff to actually maybe put up an extra stage here because we have an extra seat for our next session. Arkadaşlar, bir tane daha koltuk ekleyebilirsek. I'm moonlighting as a master of ceremony here, so let me go back to my original job as a journalist. As we sort of have 2-3 minutes with you. I'm wondering what your strategy is when it comes to dealing with media fatigue. I understand that this is a very well-crafted strategy and it's been going extremely well for the past 9 months. Keep in mind, winter's around the corner, the war has no end in sight. And I think it was 2 panels ago, one of our, please excuse me, I do forget the name, but they said that the news media loves to talk about something on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and on Friday they move on to something else. How do you prevent that? What is your strategy there?
one thing that we learned is that whatever strategy you have to be ready to adjust it and change it. And of course, strategies we had in the beginning, in the spring, are not the same we have now, because we realized at some point the fatigue. And I realized that I used to work in media and also international media. I realized that, okay, you write a news story, Russia has thrown like 100 rockets at Ukraine, Ukrainian energy infrastructure is destroyed, and Ukraine is suffering, Russia is bad, Ukraine is good. Okay, you wrote it once, twice, 3 times. On the fourth time, okay, everyone understands that. What do you communicate? This is the biggest challenge we have right now, because at this point, media start to look for extravagant topics. Okay, so this is all understood. Now let's look for a story that Russia planned to attack Japan in 2021. This is interesting now. So this is the big problem that we face. But the answer is larger investment in not only media, but also other types of communications, like even the paid advertisement on foreign TV. Government communication has to be stronger. And you have to engage journalists all the time and try to invent topics for them and try to make it interesting for them.
I'll be in Kiev next week to do a weeks-long broadcast for my company, Cephe. I'd love to interview. So you're on the spot. I want to interview you.
You will be very welcome.
Okay. Second question, my last question. When you're talking about sort of, all right, the Russians attacked a particular city in eastern Ukraine or southern Ukraine, and you're very effective in terms of getting that narrative out. One thing that we've seen on multiple occasions in this conflict is quote-unquote false flag operations. This is extremely dangerous because it has a lot of dangerous consequences. One of the more recent examples is that Russia was claiming that the Ukrainians already had nuclear bombs and they would actually detonate it. And I'm not just talking dirty bombs, or I think it could be dirty bombs, conventional weapons that actually have nuclear waste. How do you deal with actually telling that story in an effective way, keeping in mind the potential risks?
We take it very seriously. We knew since the very first hours they started spreading the dirty bomb allegations. We knew that it's a complete fantasy, but we understood that this is a coordinated effort because this was a Russian defense minister actually getting on the phone and calling other foreign ministers and telling this stuff, which is also telling that they cannot get the media attention the other way. Only they need their defense minister to sit on the phone to get headlines. But we realized it's a serious thing, and we started counteracting immediately. So we immediately refuted it on the level of the foreign minister. Then the president came out and refuted this story. Then we invited the IAEA experts to Ukraine to actually officially refute this story. So this was a huge battle. I think we won the battle with the dirty bomb, and denied them basically this false story, except for their domestic audience, because I mean, we have always to bear in mind that sometimes they just play for their domestic audience, and there is little you can do about it.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have any backdoor communications with the Russians?
No, there is no communication between. No, this was not ambiguous answer. We don't have any direct communication right now. There is the grain deal, communication which goes via Turkey
and the United Nations,
but behind, except of that,
okay.
Nothing.
All right, George, pleasure listening to you. Thank you very much, and I'll hope to see you next week in Kiev. Thank you very much. A round of applause to George. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause to you as well for your patience. It's been a long day, I know. We've come to the last session of the day. I would like to talk about media in a post-truth age. Doğan Eşkinat. Doğan is the International Media Coordinator for the